Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep on a topic that I think is pretty personal for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Loneliness.
Yeah, it's something I think we've all felt at some point or another.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, you've brought some really fascinating articles and research about how this whole thing plays out
Yeah.
around the world.
It's really interesting to see how different cultures perceive and kind of address loneliness.
Yeah. So let's start by painting a picture
Yeah.
of, what this looks like globally.
Sure.
The stats are kind of startling, aren't they?
They are absolutely. I mean, in the UK, for example, nearly half of adults say they feel lonely at least sometimes.
Wow.
And in Brazil, that number jumps to 50%.
Half the population.
Yeah, it's huge.
Wow.
And it's not just limited to certain age groups either.
Right.
We have data from Japan showing that a quarter of their population over 60 feels isolated.
Wow, that's a significant chunk of the population.
It really is, and it kind of highlights how widespread this thing is, crossing all sorts of demographics.
Yeah.
But it also raises a really interesting question.
Okay.
How are we measuring something as subjective as loneliness?
Right. Is there like a loneliness scale?
Well, there are tools like the UCLA Loneliness Scale, which uses questionnaires to kind of gauge how people feel about their social connections.
Okay.
But it's not as simple as asking, are you lonely?
Right.
Cultural factors can really influence how comfortable people are with even talking about loneliness.
Right. And some cultures, may even see it as a personal failing or a weakness rather than like a human experience.
Exactly.
So I guess the survey results are really just one piece of the puzzle.
They are.
So what are some of the other methods that researchers are using?
Well, you have things like government studies,
I see.
like the UK's Community Life Survey,
Okay.
which tries to capture a broader picture of social well-being.
Okay.
And then you have some researchers analyzing social media data.
Oh, interesting.
So thinking digital footprints, online interactions,
Wow.
to see if they can spot patterns of isolation.
So there's not like a one-size-fits-all approach to measuring this.
Not at all.
And I imagine it must be tricky to compare data across different countries.
Oh, it is. Each culture has its own nuances, its own way of viewing and expressing loneliness.
Right.
Makes you realize that the numbers alone just can't tell the whole story.
Right. It's like trying to understand a complex painting by just looking at one brushstroke.
Exactly.
So with all these complexities, what are countries doing to actually tackle this issue?
Well, some are taking some really innovative approaches.
Okay.
The UK, for example, was the first country in the world to appoint a minister for loneliness.
A minister dedicated to tackling loneliness.
Back in 2018.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
What does that actually entail?
Well, they are responsible for developing and implementing a national strategy to combat loneliness.
Okay.
And it involves bringing together all sorts of groups,
Like what?
from healthcare providers to local communities, even businesses, to create a more coordinated effort.
Wow. So it's not just throwing money at the problem. It's really a holistic approach across different sectors of society.
Precisely.
That's amazing.
And that kind of comprehensive approach seems to be catching on.
Oh.
Other countries are now considering similar strategies,
Wow.
which is fantastic to see.
Yeah, it sounds like the UK's initiative has really created a ripple effect,
I think so.
kind of raising awareness and inspiring action on a global scale.
Exactly. And it's not just governments either. We're seeing community-led initiatives popping up everywhere.
Yeah, like the LPot community, right?
Yes.
Their work really stood out to us in our research.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about them?
So they're a fantastic example of a grassroots organization taking a really proactive approach to combating loneliness.
Oh?
And they focus on organizing a wide range of activities.
Such as?
Coffee mornings, exercise classes, support groups.
Uh-huh.
It's all about creating these informal spaces where people can connect organically.
Yeah. In today's world, it's so easy to just feel disconnected.
It really is.
And sometimes it's those small, everyday interactions that can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And the beauty of the LPot community's approach is that it's tailored to the specific needs and interests of the people that they serve. It's all about building genuine connections and fostering a sense of belonging.
It's really heartening to see communities just taking ownership and creating that positive change.
It is.
From the ground up.
It is. And what's even more encouraging is that these efforts aren't limited to specific regions.
Right.
There are inspiring examples popping up all over the globe.
So what are some of the other examples? What else is happening around the world to kind of address this?
Well, in Japan, for example, they have programs aimed at preventing kurokushi,
Okay.
which tragically translates to lonely death.
Wow.
It's a poignant reminder of the severe consequences of isolation.
That's both heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time.
It really is.
So what approaches are they taking?
Well, these programs focus on connecting elderly individuals with their communities, offering social support, and ensuring they are not completely isolated.
Wow, it's amazing to see countries taking such proactive steps to address this issue.
It is.
It really highlights the fact that loneliness can have real and serious consequences.
Absolutely. And alongside these community-based efforts, we're also seeing the emergence of innovative solutions using technology.
Right. Technology's role in all this is complex
It is.
because it can connect us in some ways, but also isolate us in others.
It's a double-edged sword.
Right.
That's for sure. On one hand, you have the ability to connect with people across vast distances and access support like never before.
Right.
But then there's the potential for excessive screen time and social media use to actually increase those feelings of isolation.
So it's all about finding that balance, right?
It is.
Using technology to enhance our connections and not replace them.
Exactly. And some countries are finding really creative ways to harness technology for good.
Okay, like what?
In South Korea, for example, they're even developing AI-powered robots designed to provide companionship,
AI companions.
especially for older adults.
That sounds straight out of a sci-fi film.
It might sound futuristic,
Yeah.
but it could be a really valuable tool for individuals who struggle with isolation.
Okay.
Imagine having a companion who can engage in conversations, remind you to take your medication,
Yeah.
even alert emergency services if needed.
That's incredible.
It is.
It really highlights how technology can be used to address this challenge in very innovative ways.
I think so.
Of course, it's not a replacement for human connection,
Right.
but it could be a valuable supplement.
Exactly. It's about finding creative solutions that address the unique challenges of loneliness in different contexts.
So it seems like there's a lot of effort being poured into combating loneliness,
There is.
from, government policies to community programs and even technological innovation.
Right.
But the big question is, are these efforts actually making a difference?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
It's actually pretty tricky to measure the long-term impact of these anti-loneliness initiatives.
Okay.
Partly because loneliness itself is such a complex issue.
Right.
And as we discussed earlier, cultural perceptions can make it really difficult to even get accurate data.
Right. It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Exactly. But there are some encouraging signs.
Yeah.
Programs like the men's sheds in Australia, for instance, have shown real promise in reducing loneliness among older men.
Oh, interesting. Tell me about that.
So these sheds offer a communal space where men can gather work on projects together and just socialize.
That makes a lot of sense. Having a shared purpose and a sense of belonging
Right.
are powerful antidotes to loneliness.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember that there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Of course.
What works in one country or community might not work in another.
Right.
And even within a community, individual needs and experiences can vary widely.
So it's about tailoring solutions to specific contexts and being mindful of those individual differences. And I imagine that cultural stigma surrounding loneliness can also make it difficult to address in certain places.
Absolutely. You're right. In some cultures, admitting to feeling lonely is still taboo.
Yeah.
And it can prevent people from seeking help or even acknowledging the problem.
Right.
That's why raising awareness and destigmatizing loneliness is so crucial.
It's about changing the narrative and creating a more supportive and understanding environment.
Right.
Because in the end, loneliness is a human experience, not a personal failing.
Well said.
And breaking down those stigmas can empower individuals to seek support and connect with others who are going through similar experiences.
Exactly.
Speaking of support, what kind of resources are out there for people who are struggling with loneliness?
Well, there's actually a growing number of resources available both online and in local communities.
Yeah.
Lots of areas have organizations or support groups specifically for people experiencing loneliness.
Like the LPot community we talked about earlier.
Yes, they are a great example. Their approach focuses on building social connections through various activities and initiatives, and they are not alone. There are similar organizations popping up around the world recognizing the importance of community in combating loneliness.
It's heartening to see that there are these dedicated spaces for people to connect and find support.
It is.
What about online resources? Are there things that people can access remotely?
Absolutely. There are tons of online platforms and forums dedicated to mental health and well-being.
Okay.
Many offer resources and support specifically for loneliness.
That's great because for some people, it can be so much easier to open up and connect with others online.
Yeah.
Especially if they're feeling anxious about face-to-face interactions.
You're right. Online platforms can offer a sense of anonymity and safety.
Right.
Which can be especially helpful for people who are hesitant to share their feelings in person.
It's not just about support groups or forums either.
Right.
There are also resources like helplines and counseling services that can provide professional guidance and support.
Absolutely. It's important to remember that loneliness is not something you have to deal with alone.
Right.
There are people and resources out there to help you through it.
It's like building a support network.
Yeah.
Both online and offline.
Right.
To help you navigate those feelings of isolation and reconnect with the world.
That's a perfect way to put it. Building those connections takes time and effort.
Yeah.
But it is so worth it.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from the global statistics and different ways loneliness is measured.
Yeah.
To, the various initiatives and resources available.
Right.
It's clear that loneliness is a complex issue requiring a multifaceted approach.
I completely agree. And for me, one of the biggest takeaways is that even though loneliness is a universal experience, the ways it's perceived, addressed, and even measured can differ so much across cultures.
You're right. It's like each culture has its own unique relationship with loneliness, shaped by its values, social norms.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
And even its language.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to approach this issue with cultural sensitivity and understanding.
Right.
There's no single solution that fits everyone.
Right. What works in one context might not be as effective in another.
Exactly.
So it's about learning from each other, sharing best practices,
right, yeah,
and adapting solutions to the specific needs of different communities and cultures.
Precisely. And it's also about recognizing that individual experiences of loneliness can vary greatly, even within the same culture.
Right.
We need to approach this issue with empathy and understanding.
Yes.
There's no right or wrong way to feel or cope with loneliness.
That's such a crucial point.
It is.
Validating those individual experiences and providing support tailored to those specific needs.
You got it. And what I find truly inspiring is the collective effort we're seeing around the world to address this issue.
It is inspiring.
From governments and organizations to communities and individuals, people are coming together to find creative solutions and build a more connected world.
It's a powerful reminder that even though loneliness can feel incredibly isolating, we're not alone in this experience.
We're not.
There are people who care, resources available, and a growing movement dedicated to fostering connection and belonging.
That's such a powerful message to leave our listeners with.
It is.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that while we've covered a lot of ground today, there's always more to learn and explore when it comes to loneliness.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Filled with eye-opening statistics, inspiring initiatives, and thought-provoking insights.
For sure.
But it's just the beginning of a much larger conversation.
Couldn't agree more, and I hope our listener continues to engage with this topic, seek out information and resources, and help build a world where fewer people have to experience the pain of loneliness.
It's a call to action.
It is.
A reminder that we all have a role to play in fostering connection.
We do.
And creating a more inclusive and compassionate society.
Absolutely. It really is a call to action. And you're right, we've only just scratched the surface. But this deep dive has already highlighted some incredible initiatives and approaches. I'm particularly fascinated by the LPot Communities model.
Yeah, me too.
What do you think makes their approach so effective?
Well, I think their focus on building genuine connections is key.
Okay.
They're not just throwing events together.
Right.
They're really carefully crafting experiences that encourage those real interactions and shared interests.
Right. It's about fostering those water cooler moments.
Yeah.
Those informal interactions that build camaraderie and break down those barriers. And they're doing it through a diverse range of activities, too.
Yeah, exactly. They've got everything from coffee mornings and book clubs to hiking groups and even coding workshops. It's like they're tapping into all these different facets of people's lives and creating those opportunities for connection around those shared passions.
And that's what's so brilliant about it. It's not just about addressing loneliness in like a clinical sense.
Right.
It's about creating a vibrant and engaging community where people can truly thrive.
It makes you wonder, what are the key ingredients that make a community like LPot so successful? Is it the diversity of activities?
Yeah.
The emphasis on shared interests? Or is there something more intangible at play?
That's a great question. I think it's a combination of factors. The variety of activities certainly plays a role. It caters to different personalities and interests, ensuring there's something for everyone.
Right.
But I also think the emphasis on shared experiences is crucial when people are engaged in activities they genuinely enjoy alongside others who share those passions.
Yeah.
It creates a natural foundation for connection.
Right. It's like that feeling of camaraderie you get when you're working on a project with a team or cheering for your favorite sports team. You're united by that shared goal or passion, and those shared experiences can forge those strong bonds.
Absolutely. And I think the LPot community does a fantastic job of cultivating that sense of shared purpose and belonging.
Yeah.
But there's also something to be said for their approach to leadership and community building.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, from what I've gathered, the LPot community is very much driven by its members.
Okay.
It's not a top-down organization dictating activities or rules.
Right.
It's a collaborative effort where members have a voice and can shape the direction of the community.
That makes so much sense. It gives people a sense of ownership and agency. They're not just passive participants, they're active contributors shaping the community they want to be a part of.
Exactly. And that kind of participatory approach is incredibly empowering.
Right.
It fosters a sense of responsibility and commitment, which ultimately strengthens the bonds within the community.
It's like the difference between joining a gym and creating your own workout group with friends. The latter is more likely to stick because you're invested in its success and accountable to the people you're sharing that journey with.
That's a great analogy, and I think that sense of shared responsibility is a key ingredient in the LPot community's recipe for success.
Okay.
It creates this virtuous cycle where members feel valued, supported, and motivated to contribute.
Right.
Which in turn strengthens the overall community.
So while the diversity of activities and shared interests are important, it sounds like the secret sauce might be this emphasis on member-driven initiatives and a strong sense of shared ownership.
I think you're onto something. It's about creating an environment where people feel empowered to connect, contribute, and build something meaningful together. And that's something that can be replicated in communities around the world, even if they don't have the exact same structure or activities as LPot.
It's about fostering that spirit of collaboration and shared purpose, regardless of the specific context.
Precisely. And I think that's a powerful takeaway for our listener. If you're looking to combat loneliness in your own life or community, think about how you can create those opportunities for genuine connection, shared experiences, and collaborative initiatives.
It's about taking ownership and being proactive. It's not always easy, but the rewards can be incredibly fulfilling.
I couldn't agree more. And even small steps can make a big difference.
Right.
Reaching out to a neighbor, volunteering at a local organization, or starting a book club with friends, these are all ways to cultivate those connections and combat loneliness in your own sphere of influence.
And speaking of spheres of influence, we've been focusing on the community level, but what about the role of government and policy in addressing loneliness? Can they learn from initiatives like the LPot community?
Absolutely. In fact, I think governments have a lot to learn from grassroots organizations like LPot.
Okay.
One of the key takeaways is the importance of fostering a sense of agency and empowerment within communities.
So it's not just about top-down solutions or throwing money at the problem.
Right.
It's about creating policies and programs that empower communities to take ownership and drive solutions from the ground up.
Exactly. And that's something the UK's Minister for Loneliness seems to understand. Their strategy emphasizes a collaborative approach, bringing together various sectors of society to address the issue.
It's like what we were discussing earlier about the importance of fostering those water cooler moments, those informal interactions that build connections and break down barriers. Governments can play a role in creating environments and policies that encourage those types of interactions.
That's a great point. For example, investing in public spaces, community centers, and even libraries can provide those physical spaces where people can gather and connect organically.
Right.
And creating policies that promote flexible work arrangements or encourage volunteering can also contribute to a more connected society.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the box and recognizing that addressing loneliness isn't just about social services.
Right.
It's about fostering a culture of connection and belonging across all aspects of society.
It really is.
It's about creating a society where people feel valued, supported, and empowered to connect with one another.
Yeah.
And that requires a multi-pronged approach involving governments, communities, and individuals working together.
Well said. And it's a reminder that even though loneliness can feel like an intensely personal experience, The solutions often lie in collective action and a shared commitment to building a more connected world.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, like, what can our listener do to learn more about this and maybe even start tackling it?
That's a great question.
In their own lives.
I think the first step is just simply acknowledging that loneliness is a common human experience.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of weakness or something to be ashamed of. We all go through it at different points in our lives.
So ditch the shame.
Right.
And embrace the fact that we all crave connection.
Exactly. Once you've done that, start exploring the resources available in your community.
Yeah.
Look for organizations like the LPot community.
Right.
See if there are any local support groups. Maybe even check out volunteer opportunities that align with your interests.
Yeah, and if there aren't a lot of options in their area, there's tons of online resources and communities that can provide support and guidance.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the power of small acts of kindness.
Oh, yeah.
Reach out to a neighbor, offer a helping hand, or just strike up a conversation with someone who might be feeling isolated.
Yeah, it's those little gestures that can create those ripples of connection and make a big difference in someone's life.
Right?
And who knows, you might even find yourself feeling more connected in the process.
That's so true. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
By fostering those connections with others, we also strengthen our own sense of belonging and purpose.
This deep dive has been incredibly eye-opening.
It has.
It's made me realize just how widespread loneliness is. But it's also given me hope, seeing all the amazing efforts being made to combat it.
I agree. It's a reminder that even though loneliness can feel isolating, we're not alone in this experience.
Right.
There are people who care, resources available, and a growing movement dedicated to fostering connection and belonging.
So to our listener out there, remember, you're not alone.
You're not.
And even small steps can make a difference.
They can.
Whether it's joining a community group, volunteering your time, or simply reaching out to a friend.
Yeah.
Every active connection counts.
Beautifully said. And remember, sometimes the simplest act of reaching out, a phone call, a text message, even just a smile, can brighten someone's day and make them feel seen and valued.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of loneliness and the power of connection.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep those brains curious and those hearts open.